GoHighLevel's Voice AI is insanely powerful, and by utilizing the Voice AI public APIs, we can create awesome platforms in order to utilize HighLevel's Voice AI ecosystem outside of the platform in order to create apps, build better systems, and interact with our voice AI agents in a way that I guarantee you haven't thought about. If you don't know me, my name is Andrew, and today I'm going to show you how you can utilize the voice AI APIs inside of HighLevel by utilizing a ton of different API endpoints. We have things that interact with contacts, conversations, calendars, and so much more. And today we're talking about the voice AI API. You can get started by going to marketplace.gohighlevel.com/docs. Then click Get Started with API, and you'll see lots of great information. And today, if we scroll down on the left-hand side, you'll see where we're working for our voice AI agents. Now, you'll see voice AI on the left-hand side, and when you click it, you'll see dashboard, agents, and actions. Now, again, if you don't know what the API is, essentially, whenever we click any of these, for example, dashboard, list call logs, this gives us a unique endpoint, which is just a URL that allows us to perform said action by listing call logs. What we do is we can take this endpoint and we can plug it in with an app like I'll show you later. You can use it inside of workflows, and you can access all sorts of information inside of your sub accounts by using the different pieces of authentication and request parameters that this specific endpoint is calling for. Again, this might sound technical, but this whole concept is very simple. We're just either sending or getting information from a URL by including different pieces of information like our location ID, our agent ID, contact ID, and so on. Now let's talk about some of the cool things you can do with the Voice AI API and all the different endpoints we have access to. Now we have three different categories: dashboard, agents, and actions, and we'll start with dashboard. Our first action is list call logs. This just allows us to list all of the different call logs for specific Voice AI agents scoped to a location. You know, with Voice AI, we can get different logs like transcriptions and information about different calls, and all we have to do is filter by agents, contacts, call type, action types, etc., and we can get our call logs from that specific agent. We can also get a specific call log by calling the get call log endpoint while using our call ID in order to find a specific call log. So if we want to find one, let's say for a specific contact, that's how we would do that. Now moving on, we have our agents actions, and these are so much fun. These are awesome. So under agents, we can create agents, list agents, patch agents, which just updates an existing Voice AI agent, get agents, and delete agents. All of these work together in order to allow us to essentially completely manage our high-level Voice AI agents outside of the platform, inside of another app, or on the back end using different automations. Each one of these will have different sets of parameters in order to include in order to perform said action. For example, the get agent action, a great place to start with the Voice AI API, because in order to interact with any of our agents, because this is really useful for just getting detailed information about a specific Voice AI agent. All we're doing is we're including the agent ID, which you can see is a required path, and the location ID and the version. So really all we're saying is look for this specific agent inside of this specific location. Now, if you want to test any of these different actions, you can do so at marketplace.gohighlevel.com/docs within each of these API systems. And you can put in your URLs, your authentication tokens, agent IDs, location IDs, and so on. Now, we're going to take a quick pause here because you might have been seeing this authentication token. What is this? And if you haven't been used to the API, let me explain it real quick. The authentication token, also called a bearer token, is what allows us to connect to a specific sub account. So if we hop over into HighLevel and we navigate down to, let's say, settings, and then we scroll all the way down to private integrations, this is where we can create our authentication token. You can see it says right at the top, API v2. That's where we're getting that token. So we can click create new integration. We enter voice AI test. We can then click next, and then we can select our scopes. There's lots of different scopes with this API, which allows us to connect to these different parts of the platform. We can just create one authentication token to connect to everything inside the sub account, but that sometimes can be pretty risky. So if we're just making one for voice AI, if we look up voice AI, you'll see we have voice AI dashboards, read only, voice AI agents, read only, agents write, agent goals read only, and agent goals write. So we can select all of these different endpoints in order to utilize different parts of our agents via the API. Now, once we've created our token by adding in our scopes and then clicking create, it will then give us this custom integration token for your specific sub account, which you can save. Make sure you only share this token with trusted parties. Do not share it publicly, because this is basically what's allowing other platforms to access your high-level account. But what we can do is we can copy this token and then utilize it inside of our sub account or inside of our apps and automations and all sorts of different places. So now that you understand how that works, let's go back and look at some of the other actions we can do with our agents. Back under the agents actions, we can create agents. This allows us to create new voice AI agent with all sorts of configurations. So you're going to see this is a massive call. As you can see this body on the right hand side as an example, there's a lot of information we can include when creating an agent. We obviously include things like the agent name, the business name, things like the welcome message, the agent prompt, the voice ID, so this is which voice we want to use, the language, patience level, max call duration, and other settings like idle reminders, when to send idle reminders, the numbers, the number pool ID, call workflow IDs. These are workflows that we're calling after the agent has finished its call, post-call notifications, custom emails, working hours, and time zones. So this is a lot of information to include for our agents, but if you just think about this, this is the same information we'd include whenever we're creating the agent ourselves. Again, this might seem like it's getting a little bit technical, but I promise you we're going to be going over some really useful use cases and actually using these towards the end of the video, so stick with me. Now, as we go through the other actions like list agents, these all are a little bit more simple. This allows us to simply list all agents from a specific location. We just include the location ID and we're good to go. We have patch agent, which allows us to update a voice AI agent, and you can include other possible parameters just like we did in the creating of an agent. We can include just one of these. Now, these aren't all necessary because we're patching an existing agent. So if we just want to, let's say, update the business name or the welcome message, we can do so with that. We can then use get agent to find a specific agent, as we talked about, and delete agent to delete a voice AI agent and all of its configurations. There's so many cool use cases for all of these different endpoints under agents, but let's go into our actions next because these are even cooler. Now, as you know, with any voice AI agent, our actions are things it can do, like sending texts, booking appointments, updating contact information, triggering workflows, and so on. And our actions section of our voice AI allows us to create agent actions, update agent actions, get agent actions, and delete agent actions. The coolest one here is just create and update. Get and delete are pretty straightforward. It just allows us to get specific details or delete agents. And whenever we're creating actions, all we do is we include our token, the version, and then the body is all of this information, right, that you see here. We have agent ID, location ID, action type, such as call, transfer, trigger a workflow, send an SMS, things like that. And you can get all of those different action IDs here. So these are what those possible values are for action types. Then we have our trigger prompt, which is just when to trigger said action, as you know, inside of voice AI. And then the other details for the action parameters. So there's different parameters for each one of these different actions. So make sure you go through these parameters. For example, if you are creating a, let's say, workflow trigger, then you have to include the trigger prompt, trigger message, and then the workflow ID. But you wouldn't have to include the workflow ID if you were building, let's say, a call transfer action parameters for your agent. Now, this is a little bit confusing. I totally understand. Let me show you something that's going to make this a little bit easier to understand. You know, whenever you go into your sub account and you go into your AI agents, then you go to create a voice AI agent, and then we click create agent from scratch. You'll see all of these different parameters whenever we are creating and editing these agents. So for an example, when we're creating an agent, this is the information that we're essentially sending back to HighLevel instead of doing it inside of this interface. So think of this as a customizable way for you to interact with parts of HighLevel via the API and specifically the voice AI side of things without having to actually log into the platform and utilize these different parts of the UI. And when we're talking about agent goals, agent actions, we'll see those whenever we are in advanced mode and we scroll down. These are our actions. So this whole list of call transfer, trigger workflow, send SMS, when we go back over here, that's what we're pulling from. So call transfer, data extraction, in-call data extraction action. And there's so many more things that we can do via the API that we can't do inside of HighLevel. But all of these are the different parts of our agent. So when we're talking about actions, this is what allows us to do those different things and add them to an existing agent or create an agent with those actions inside of HighLevel. And of course, that works the same way with all of the other actions, such as update agent action, get agent action, and delete agent action for the API. you have a lot of different options for what you can do with the API. One common one is building apps. You can build custom marketplace apps that you can deliver to other sub-accounts on HighLevel or even just for your own sub-account in which this API is useful, because whenever you install an app, it gets access to your sub-account and then you can perform all of these actions outside of HighLevel. Another great example, which is super underutilized, is just utilizing the HighLevel ecosystem on a different front end. Now, what do I mean when I say this? I mean, if you have another app, not just a marketplace app, but an actually developed app, whether it's a web app or a mobile app, and you want it to interact with pieces of HighLevel on its own, that's what you can do via the API. Another example is you can actually use the API inside of workflows. So this is something that can be really useful if you want to just automate a couple of pieces of your business. Let's say, for example, you have your sub account created and you want to be able to update your agent on the fly by simply texting it. Well, what you could technically do is log into HighLevel, create a new automation. You can then set your trigger as received SMS. You can then set your trigger as customer replied and include SMS and include the replied channel as SMS. We can then utilize what we call webhooks inside of our automations. And these webhooks allow us to send and receive information from our API within HighLevel within a workflow itself. So if we select, let's say, a regular webhook, we have our method first. Let's say, for an example, we want to create an agent using this workflow. We'll use this post endpoint by copying this. You see how this says post? We'll select our method as post, include our URL, and then in our custom data and headers, that's right, we use the same information that we have over here, and it literally has all of it laid out for us. So here we have our header parameters, we have our API version, and then we have our body as JSON. So you can play around with this and utilize either the regular webhook action, or you can also utilize the custom webhook action, which gives you a little bit more control over what you're actually sending to your agent. As you can see, we have more methods like post, get, put, and delete instead of just post and get. So if you're building a more complex system, the custom webhook action will be more useful for you. But again, let's say we're doing post, we're using this URL. Our authorization, we can set up right here by selecting bearer token. And then guess what? We're using that token that we saw earlier inside of our sub account that we created inside of private integrations. We're using that here. So we can click create new key. We can include a basic name like basic voice AI. We can then include our key here, click create. This will now use our authorization here. And then you see application type JSON. We can go back over here and just use the exact same thing that we have in this JSON body, copying this and utilizing this inside of here with our custom values. So you need to actually include those values. And this can depend on lots of different use cases for how you're actually launching the workflow. Another good example would be a customer submits a form and then it automatically creates an agent in their sub account so they don't have to do it themselves. They can include all of the information in a form on a different website that includes the information like the location ID, the agent name, the business name, the welcome message, agent prompt, all this info. And then we can pull this into this part, like let's say the agent prompt. We could pull this in using custom values and then using whatever we just submitted from the form. So if it's something like a custom value or anything, or a contact specific value like full name, right, then we can use that inside of our workflow. Yes, there's a little bit of coding that is technically involved in this process, but it's quite easy to learn how to actually apply this to your business. That case of submitting a form and just having it launch a workflow is a great way in order to actually utilize the API in this case. Of course, the API is more designed for developers, but I want you to not be worried about utilizing it for yourself in your business, and don't see it as daunting as it might sound, because at the end of the day, if you just learn how to use it, it's really not that bad and you can do a lot of cool stuff with it. Now, that's the example of utilizing it inside of a workflow. We can also utilize it inside of our own app. So for this case, I have an example voice AI tester here, which allows us to utilize all the different parts of the platform by entering our bearer token, our information like the agent ID, our authorization, etc. And if you think about this, you could do this with your own app that you have created and developed outside of HighLevel and then interact with HighLevel's ecosystem using your systems. So there's a ton of cool stuff that you can do with the voice AI APIs. The best way to learn and the best way to utilize it is think of an example use case for yourself and then go out there and apply it and start using it. But if you have any questions about your specific use case, or you're trying to learn it and you're coming across some errors, feel free to work with the HighLevel support team. They are more than happy to help you, or leave a comment on this video and we'll do our best to help. Of course, I really hope you got the chance to learn something new by watching this video. As always, my name is Andrew and thank you very much for watching.